The harsh winter wind howled through the dense forest of Montana's Glacier National Park as Raven Blackwood trudged through knee-deep snow. His weathered hands gripped his rifle tightly, more out of habit than necessity. 20 years as a forest ranger had taught him to always be prepared, but nothing could have prepared him for what he was about to discover. The morning had started like any other patrol, with Raven checking the remote cameras he'd set up to monitor wolf activity in the area. But as he approached Camera Station 7, something felt different. The air carried a metallic scent that made his stomach turn. Fresh blood. Following the scent, Raven pushed through a thick cluster of pine branches. His breath caught in his throat. There, in a small clearing, stood a massive grizzly bear tied to an ancient Douglas fir. Heavy chains wrapped around its chest and neck, cutting into its matted fur. The bear's normally powerful frame looked weak and sickly, its eyes glazed with fever. But it was the ground around the tree that made Raven's blood run cold. Someone had scattered fresh meat in a wide circle, a clear attempt to attract the local wolf pack. Nearby, he spotted fresh boot prints in the snow, no more than a few hours old. This was no accident. Someone had deliberately left this sick bear as bait, creating a cruel arena for nature's most fearsome predators. As Raven stepped closer, the bear's eyes met his. In all his years in the wilderness, he'd never seen such a look of desperate intelligence in an animal's gaze. The bear made no aggressive move, no threatening sound. Instead, it let out a soft whimper that seemed to pierce straight through Raven's heart. A distant wolf howl echoed through the trees, followed by another, closer this time. The sun was setting, and Raven knew he had to make a choice. Park regulations strictly forbade interfering with wildlife, even in cases of distress. Breaking those rules could cost him his job, his pension, everything he'd worked for. But as he stood there, watching the bear's labored breathing, he realized this was about more than just regulations. What he didn't know was that his decision in the next few moments would set in motion a chain of events that would change not only his life, but challenge everything he thought he knew about the relationship between humans and wild animals. The wolf howls grew closer, their eerie chorus now coming from multiple directions. Raven pulled out his flashlight as the forest darkened around him, its beam catching snowflakes that had begun to fall. His mind raced back to the mysterious boot prints. They weren't from standard hiking boots. These had a distinctive pattern he'd never seen before, with strange circular markings in the heel. Someone had gone to great lengths to plan this cruel scenario. The sick bear shifted slightly, its chains rattling against the tree bark. In the beam of the flashlight, Raven noticed something he'd missed before. A small metal tag glinting from the bear's ear. This wasn't just any grizzly, this was Shadow, a female bear he'd helped tag 3 springs ago. She'd been remarkable even then, showing an unusual gentleness during the tagging process. Over the years, he'd documented her raising 2 cubs successfully, demonstrating remarkable parenting skills that had fascinated researchers. "Oh, Shadow," Raven whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "What happened to you?" He moved closer, examining her condition more carefully. Her fur was matted with what looked like some kind of chemical residue, and her normally muscular frame had wasted away significantly. This wasn't just illness, this was deliberate poisoning. The sound of breaking branches snapped his attention to the forest's edge. In the growing darkness, he caught glimpses of moving shadows. The wolf pack was closing in. But something about their behavior seemed off. Wolves typically avoided confrontation with humans, yet these seemed unusually bold, almost purposeful in their approach. Raven's radio crackled to life, making him jump. "Station 7, come in. This is dispatch. We've got reports of unusual wolf activity in your sector. Please confirm your location. His hand hovered over the radio. One call would bring backup, but it would also mean explaining the situation. As he watched Shadow's labored breathing, he noticed something else. Fresh claw marks in the tree trunk above her chains. They weren't from her. They were too high, too deliberate. Someone was leaving messages, marking this location for a reason. The pieces started falling into place. The strange boot prints, the chemical residue, the wolves' unusual behavior. This wasn't just animal cruelty. This was part of something bigger, something more sinister. Shadow wasn't just a random target. She was chosen specifically, perhaps because of her documented gentle nature. Another wolf howl pierced the air, this one so close it made Shadow flinch. The pack was almost upon them. In the distance, thunder rumbled, promising a storm. Raven had minutes, maybe seconds, to make his decision. His fingers traced the multi-tool on his belt, the one tool that might be strong enough to cut through Shadow's chains. But using it would mean crossing a line he'd never crossed in his career. The radio crackled again, more urgently this time. Station 7, please respond. We have multiple reports of wolf activity. Do you copy? Shadow's eyes met his again, and in that moment, Raven saw something that shook him to his core. In her pain-filled gaze, he recognized not just suffering but trust. Despite everything humans had done to her, she was looking at him with an intelligence that seemed to understand he was her only hope. The decision crystallized in his mind with sudden clarity. 20 years of following rules melted away like snow in spring. Raven switched off his radio mid-crackle and pulled out his multi-tool. As he approached Shadow, he spoke softly, letting her grow accustomed to his presence. "Easy, girl. Easy now. I'm going to help you." The sound of movement in the underbrush grew closer. Yellow eyes glinted in the darkness. He counted 6 pairs. The wolf pack was larger than usual for this territory, and their behavior was becoming more aggressive by the minute. They were moving with an unnatural coordination, almost as if... A sharp crack echoed through the trees, like a branch breaking under heavy weight. But this sound came from above. Raven's flashlight beam shot upward, catching a glimpse of something that made his heart stop. A small black device attached to the tree trunk, well above Shadow's head. A camera. Someone was watching. Working faster now, Raven began sawing at the chains. His hands trembled from cold and adrenaline, but years of wilderness survival training kept him focused. Shadow remained eerily still, as if sensing the gravity of the moment. The only sound was her labored breathing and the scrape of metal against metal. The first chain snapped with a sharp ping that seemed to echo through the forest. The wolves responded with a chorus of growls, moving closer. Raven could smell them now, but something was off about their scent. Mixed with their wild musk was a chemical tang, similar to the residue in Shadow's fur. A memory surfaced from his training days. Stories of illegal wildlife trafficking rings using controlled predators to force bears into submission. The wolves weren't hunting naturally. They were being manipulated, perhaps with the same chemicals used on Shadow. The storm broke overhead with a deafening crack of thunder. Heavy snow began falling, cutting visibility to mere feet. Raven's fingers were going numb, but he kept working at the second chain. Shadow's breathing had become more rapid, her eyes darting between him and the approaching wolves. Suddenly, a new sound cut through the storm, the distinctive whop-whop-whop of helicopter blades. A powerful searchlight swept through the trees, casting wild shadows. The wolves scattered at the noise, but Raven knew they wouldn't go far. Not if they were being controlled. "This is Park Service Air Support," a voice boomed from above. "Ground unit, identify yourself immediately." Raven's heart pounded. The helicopter had to be responding to dispatch's unanswered calls. In minutes, the clearing would be swarming with rangers. They'd find him breaking protocol, interfering with wildlife, ignoring direct orders. But worse, whoever had set up this cruel experiment would see him through that camera, and something told him they weren't the type to leave witnesses. The second chain was halfway cut. Shadow had begun trembling. Whether from fear or the effects of the poison, he couldn't tell. The searchlight swept closer, and in its harsh glare, Raven noticed something that turned his blood to ice. Shadow's ear tag wasn't a standard research marker. Embedded in the metal was a tiny blinking light, barely visible. This wasn't just about animal cruelty or trafficking. This was something far more sophisticated, far more dangerous. The wolves had regrouped, forming a tight semicircle around the tree. Their movements were synchronized, almost mechanical. In the strobing lights from above, Raven could see their eyes weren't just reflecting light. They were glowing with an unnatural blue tinge. Whatever was controlling them was more than just chemicals. His radio sparked to life one final time, but instead of dispatch, a different voice came through. Deep, distorted, and chillingly calm. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, Ranger Blackwood. Some trees are better left unpruned." The voice knew his name. Raven's mind raced as he continued sawing at the chain, faster now. The helicopter's searchlight swept over him again, and in that brief illumination, he noticed something that had been hidden before, a thin black wire running down the tree trunk, connecting the camera to something buried in the snow. "You're interfering with a classified research operation, Ranger," the voice continued. "Step away from the subject and you'll be cleared of all protocol violations. Your pension will remain intact. We can even arrange an early retirement package." Raven's hands stilled for just a moment. Early retirement had been his dream for the past 5 years. A chance to finally write that book about wildlife conservation he'd been planning, to spend more time with his teenage daughter, Maya, who'd been begging him to quit the dangerous job since her mother passed away. The offer was tempting, suspiciously so. A pained grunt from Shadow snapped him back to reality. In the growing storm, he could see her eyes starting to glaze over. Whatever poison they'd used was getting worse. The wolves crept closer, their unnaturally blue eyes fixed on Shadow with mechanical precision. They moved like puppets on invisible strings, their natural pack behavior completely suppressed by whatever technology was controlling them. "Last warning, Ranger Blackwood," the voice crackled. "Think about Maya." The mention of his daughter's name sent a chill through him that had nothing to do with the snow. How long had they been watching him? What else did they know? The helicopter was circling lower now, its powerful downdraft creating a vortex of snow around the clearing. That's when Shadow did something extraordinary. Despite her weakened state, she shifted her body, using what little slack she had in the chains to position herself between Raven and the approaching wolves. Even poisoned and captive, she was trying to protect him. The same bear he'd watched nurturing cubs years ago hadn't lost her protective instinct, even toward a human. The gesture awakened something in Raven's memory. A file he'd discovered last week buried in the station's archives. A decade-old report about missing bears in national parks across the country, all of them known for unusual intelligence or gentle behavior around humans. The report had been mysteriously deleted from the system the next day, but not before Raven had noticed a recurring detail. Each bear had been tagged with next-gen tracking devices by a private research firm called Neurobiome Technologies. The same logo he now noticed etched into Shadow's ear tag. A wolf lunged forward, but its movement was jerky, almost robotic. Raven caught a glimpse of something metallic embedded in its neck, some kind of technological implant glinting in the helicopter's lights. These weren't just chemically controlled animals. They were test subjects in something much darker. "Your father made the right choice 30 years ago, Ranger," the voice said, softer now. "He walked away when we asked. That's why he lived to see his granddaughter grow up." The words hit Raven like a physical blow. His father's sudden retirement from the Park Service had never made sense, until now. The old man had taken the secret to his grave last spring, but his final words suddenly carried new weight. "Sometimes the kindest thing looks like betrayal, son." But as Raven looked at Shadow, at her desperate attempt to protect him despite her own suffering, he knew this wasn't one of those times. The second chain was almost cut through. The wolves were less than 20 feet away now, moving forward in perfect, unnatural synchronization. The helicopter's speaker crackled to life. Ground unit surrounded. "You have 30 seconds to identify yourself." In the chaos of swirling snow and searching lights, Raven noticed something else. Shadow's eyes had locked onto something in the trees behind him. Following her gaze, he caught a flash of movement, a darker shadow against the white storm. For a moment, he thought it was another wolf, but the shape was wrong. It was tall, human, moving with deliberate purpose toward the buried end of the black wire. The voice on the radio had gone silent, but Raven could feel unseen eyes watching, calculating, deciding. His multi-tool bit deeper into the chain as the wolves took another synchronized step forward. Shadow's breathing had become shallow, her time running out. Whatever choice he was going to make, it had to be now. In that moment of desperate clarity, Raven remembered something else from his father's final days. A seemingly random comment about a hidden USB drive in his old service boots. Raven had found it but never plugged it in, respecting his father's privacy even after death. Now he realized it wasn't about privacy at all. It was insurance, protection, evidence of whatever his father had discovered about neurobiome 3 decades ago. The sound of gunfire intensified, but now Raven could distinguish 2 distinct groups, the military figures in the trees firing down, and Dr. Chen's resistance fighters returning fire from covered positions around the clearing's edge. "The USB drive your father left you." Dr. Chen's voice cut through the chaos, closer now. "It contains locations of 12 other testing sites across North America. Shadow isn't their only success story. There are others, wolves, bears, even mountain lions, all implanted with their neural tech. Some broke free of control like Shadow, others—" Her voice trailed off as another explosion lit up the night sky. Shadow suddenly pushed against Raven's side, forcing him to move just as a bullet struck the tree where he'd been standing. Her enhanced intelligence wasn't just about understanding. She could anticipate threats, calculate trajectories. The neural implant had given her mathematical precision on top of her natural instincts. Through the swirling snow, Raven caught glimpses of more animals emerging from the forest. But these moved differently from the controlled wolves. A massive elk with scarred flanks charged one of the military positions, its antlers catching moonlight and something else, tiny glints of metal that matched Shadow's implant. Behind it came 2 mountain lions moving in perfect coordination, their movements natural, but with an unmistakable strategic purpose. "They found each other," Dr. Chen explained, finally visible as she crouched behind a fallen log nearby. Her face was weathered but fierce, exactly as Raven remembered from his childhood visits to the research station. The animals who broke free of neurobiome's control started communicating through their implants, forming their own network. They've been watching, planning, gathering intelligence. Shadow became their leader 6 months ago. The sound of approaching vehicles cut through the storm. Heavy engines, military grade. Neurobiome's reinforcements were coming. The wolves were beginning to stir, their implants flickering back to life with a different colored pulse. Purple now instead of blue. "They're switching to the emergency control frequency," Dr. Chen said urgently, pulling out a tablet covered in blinking data streams. "We can't block this one. Raven, you need to get Shadow out of here now. Take this." She handed him a small device that looked like a compass, but displayed unfamiliar symbols. "It'll lead you to a safe house. The Resistance will meet you there." Shadow had other ideas. Instead of retreating, she moved to the center of the clearing and let out a roar that seemed to shake the very ground. The sound carried something else, a subsonic pulse that made Raven's fillings vibrate. The wolves' implants stuttered, and the approaching vehicle's engines suddenly died. "Impossible," Dr. Chen whispered, staring at her tablet. "She's not just blocking their signal. She's broadcasting her own. She's actually hacked their neural network." The wolves rose as one, but their movements were different now, fluid, natural, wild. Their eyes had lost the artificial glow. Behind them, more animals emerged from the darkness. Bears, mountain lions, wolves, even a pair of wolverines. All moved with purpose, all bearing the telltale glint of neural implants, all now free of Neurobiome's control. Through his scope, Raven caught sight of something that made his blood run cold. The military figures were rappelling down from the trees, but in the chaos of swirling snow and shadows, their movements looked wrong. Jerky, mechanical, synchronized. When one's mask was blown off by the wind, Raven saw not human skin, but a metallic sheen. "Dear God," Dr. Chen breathed. "They're not just controlling animals. Those aren't human soldiers, they're androids. Neurobiome isn't just a wildlife research company. They're developing autonomous weapons. The animal control technology was just a test run." Shadow's roar changed pitch, becoming more focused, directional. The android soldiers began to twitch and spark, their coordinated movements deteriorating. She wasn't just fighting their control of animals. She was turning their own technology against them. A new sound cut through the storm, rhythmic thumping that made Raven's chest vibrate. Military helicopters, at least 3, maybe more. But these weren't Park Service or even standard military. Their sleek shapes were unlike anything he'd ever seen, and they moved with the same mechanical precision as the android soldiers. "We've got incoming," a resistance fighter shouted. "Multiple bogies heavily armed." Shadow turned to Raven, and in her eyes he saw something that transcended mere intelligence or survival instinct. There was determination there, and something else. A request. She looked pointedly at his radio, then at the approaching helicopters, then back at him. "The neural network," Dr. Chen said suddenly, understanding dawning on her face. "Your radio frequency, if we boost it through Shadow's implant, combine it with her blocking signal." She began typing frantically on her tablet. It could create a cascading failure in their entire system, but the power surge would likely fry every implant in range, including— She didn't need to finish. Including Shadow's. The same implant that had given her enhanced intelligence, that had let her break free and help others escape, would be destroyed. She would survive, but everything she had become, everything she had built with the other enhanced animals, would be lost. Shadow's eyes never left Raven's face. In them, he saw the same trust he'd recognized when he first found her chained to the tree. But now, it wasn't just trust in him to save her. It was trust in him to help her save everyone else, no matter the cost. Time seemed to slow as memories flooded Raven's mind. His father's last words about the USB drive, The missing bear's report, Dr. Chen's disappearance, Shadow protecting her cubs all those years ago. Every piece had been leading to this moment, this choice. The military helicopters were closing in, their rotors throwing up clouds of snow that turned the clearing into a whiteout. Through the chaos, Raven caught glimpses of more android soldiers deploying from rappel lines, their movements becoming more erratic as Shadow's signal interfered with their control systems. "Multiple targets detected," came a mechanical voice from the nearest android, engaging lethal protocols. Its faceplate slid back to reveal not just optical sensors, but what looked like a neural implant system far more advanced than those used on the animals. These weren't just remote-controlled robots. They were fully autonomous combat units using the same technology that had enhanced Shadow's intelligence. The implant technology was never meant for animals, Dr. Chen shouted over the growing chaos, her fingers flying over her tablet. It was military tech from the start, but something went wrong. Or right, depending on how you look at it. The animals developed a type of collective consciousness through the neural network. They became more than the sum of their parts. Shadow discovered she could share not just thoughts, but experiences, emotions, memories with others in the network. That's what scared Neurobiome. They couldn't control what the animals were becoming. A massive explosion rocked the clearing as one of the resistance fighters launched a shoulder-mounted missile at the nearest helicopter. The aircraft's defensive systems kicked in, some kind of energy shield that deflected the projectile into the trees. Advanced tech, decades ahead of anything that should exist. Shadow suddenly stiffened, her implant pulsing with a new intensity. Around the clearing, the other enhanced animals responded, moving into formation. The wolves flanked the android soldiers, while the mountain lions took up strategic positions in the trees. The elk formed a defensive line, their massive bodies providing cover for the resistance fighters. It wasn't just coordinated movement, it was complex military strategy. They're accessing the androids' tactical databases through the neural network, Dr. Chen explained, amazement in her voice. Shadow's not just blocking their control signals. She's learning their combat protocols in real time and sharing them with the others, but... She checked her tablet, face grim. The power drain is massive. Her implant is already starting to deteriorate. As if to confirm this, Shadow swayed slightly, her breathing becoming labored. Yet she maintained her position, maintained the signal that was holding back the full force of Neurobiome's assault. Through their shared connection, the other enhanced animals showed signs of distress, feeling her struggle. The radio in Raven's hand crackled to life again, but this time multiple voices came through, a cacophony of mechanical and human tones overlapping. Asset Shadow compromised. Neural network breach detected. Project Alpha compromised. Initiate Protocol Omega. Eliminate all witnesses. The android soldiers suddenly stopped their erratic movements, their optical sensors glowing with a deep red light. Whatever was happening, Shadow's interference was failing. They're activating their fail-safe protocol, Dr. Chen warned, her voice tight with fear. If we're going to use the radio frequency to overload their network, it has to be now. But Raven, she met his eyes, this isn't just about shutting down some implants. The neural network has evolved far beyond its original programming. These animals have developed a genuine consciousness through it. They feel, think, remember. When we destroy the network, we're not just turning off technology, we're ending something, someone. That never should have existed, but now does. Something beautiful and terrible and completely unique. Shadow turned to face the approaching androids, her massive form silhouetted against the storm. Around her, the other enhanced animals took up defensive positions, but their movements were different now. More natural, more instinctive. They were preparing to fight not as controlled units, but as wild creatures protecting their family. Neural network breach at 80%, the mechanical voice announced. Termination sequence initiated. The implants are failing, Dr. Chen warned, checking her readings. The network can't handle this level of data transfer much longer. Whatever we're going to do, it has to be now. But Shadow had one final message to share through the neural link. As Raven raised the radio, preparing to trigger the overload that would destroy the network, her translated voice filled his mind with an unexpected warmth. We were an experiment that became an evolution, a mistake that became a miracle. What we created together, this bridge between species, this sharing of souls, it can't be destroyed by shutting down some technology. The connections we've made, the understanding we've gained, it's part of us now. Part of our wild hearts, our natural instincts. We'll remember, even when the implants are gone. And maybe, someday, humans will be ready to remember with us. The android soldiers opened fire, their energy weapons cutting through the swirling snow with deadly precision. The military helicopters descended, their advanced targeting systems locking onto every living thing in the clearing. But in that moment, as chaos erupted around them, Raven saw something extraordinary in Shadow's eyes. Not fear, not resignation, but a fierce joy. She had achieved something far beyond what her creators had intended. She had turned a weapon into a wonder, a control system into a connection that transcended species. A barrage of energy beams cut through the clearing, forcing everyone to take cover. The android soldiers advanced methodically, their movements perfectly synchronized as they established a kill box around the area. Above, the military helicopters deployed what looked like smaller drone units, each armed with the same advanced weaponry as their parent craft. Neural network breach at 90%, the mechanical voice announced, initiating final containment protocol. But something was happening to the enhanced animals. As Shadow's consciousness continued to flow through the network, their movements began to change. The wolves no longer moved with military precision, but with their natural pack instincts. Only now, those instincts were enhanced by a deeper understanding, a shared wisdom that transcended their technological augmentations. The mountain lions split into hunting pairs, using ancient predator tactics refined by generations of shared experience. Even the elk, massive and powerful, began a complex defensive pattern that spoke of both natural herd behavior and tactical brilliance. "Look at this," Dr. Chen breathed, her tablet displaying cascading waves of neural activity. The network isn't just copying their consciousness, it's integrating with their natural intelligence. Even after we destroy the implants, they'll retain this new level of awareness. Not as technology, but as an evolution of their wild nature. Through the radio, Shadow's translated voice continued, growing stronger despite the failing implants. "We were meant to be their weapons, but we became something they feared more, a bridge between worlds. Every memory we've shared, every connection we've made, has changed us at a level deeper than technology. We've learned to see through each other's eyes, to understand with each other's hearts. That understanding can't be unmade." The android soldiers suddenly froze, their optical sensors flickering as Shadow's signal interfered with their control systems. In that moment of reprieve, Raven saw movement at the edge of the clearing, more animals emerging from the storm. These ones had no implants, no technological enhancements, yet they moved with purpose toward the enhanced animals. Regular wolves, bears, mountain lions, drawn by some primal recognition of what was happening. The signal, Dr. Chen realized, checking her readings. It's not just affecting the neural network anymore. Somehow, Shadow's consciousness is resonating with their natural brain patterns. she's bridging the gap between enhanced and unenhanced animals, showing them all a new way of being. The military helicopters opened fire again, their energy weapons carving glowing paths through the snowstorm. But now the enhanced and unenhanced animals moved together in perfect harmony, natural instincts amplified by shared understanding. A pack of regular wolves flanked the android soldiers while their enhanced counterparts struck from above. Mountain lions, both enhanced and natural, used the chaos of battle to systematically disable the drones. Shadow's voice filled the radio once more. What they created in us was meant to suppress our wild nature, to make us controllable. Instead, it awakened something that was always there. The capacity to connect, to understand, to transcend the boundaries between species. Every animal in this forest is part of something greater now, something that will continue long after the implants are destroyed. The resistance fighters had regrouped, their conventional weapons finding weak points in the android soldiers' armor thanks to the coordinated efforts of the animals. Dr. Chen's tablet showed the neural network reaching critical levels, the implants straining under the massive transfer of consciousness. Neural network breach at 95%, the mechanical voice warned. System collapse imminent. Shadow turned to Raven one last time, her eyes filled with an intelligence that went beyond any technological enhancement. Through their connection, he felt rather than heard her final message. This was never about controlling nature. It was about remembering how to listen to it. The radio grew warm in his hand as the frequency aligned with Shadow's broadcast. Around the clearing, every enhanced animal's implant began to pulse with the same rhythm. Not the mechanical precision of their military programming, but something organic, alive, like a heartbeat shared across species. Dr. Chen's tablet displayed one final reading before overloading. The consciousness transfer is complete. Whatever happens now, they'll remember. They'll all remember. The android soldiers raised their weapons for a final assault, just as the military helicopters locked onto their positions. The storm reached its peak, snow and wind creating a white wall around the clearing. In that moment of chaos, Shadow reared up to her full height, her massive form silhouetted against the darkness. Every animal in the clearing, enhanced and natural alike, moved in concert with her, their bodies forming a living barrier between the humans and the encroaching forces. The radio pulsed one final time, ready to trigger the cascade that would destroy the neural network. But as Raven prepared to activate it, he realized that what they were about to end wasn't just a technological experiment gone wrong. It was the first chapter of a new kind of story, one where the line between human and animal, between technology and nature, had been forever redrawn. Neural network breach at 98%, the mechanical voice announced, initiating final termination sequence. The android soldiers moved as one, their weapons charging with a high-pitched whine that made the air crackle with energy. Above, the military helicopters' targeting systems locked onto every living thing in the clearing, their advanced technology preparing to eliminate all traces of Neurobiome's greatest mistake and its greatest achievement. But Shadow wasn't finished. Through the failing neural network, she broadcast one last message that echoed not just through the radio, but seemed to resonate in the very ground beneath their feet. What they never understood was that technology didn't make us more than animals. It helped us show humans what animals have always been. Conscious, connected, aware. We don't need implants to be intelligent. We don't need networks to be linked. We've always been part of something greater. As if in response to her words, the storm intensified, the swirling snow creating ghostly shapes in the darkness. Dr. Chen's tablet displayed impossible readings before finally shorting out completely. The neural activity, It's not just in the enhanced animals anymore. It's spreading, resonating with every living thing in range. Shadow's consciousness isn't just being transferred, it's awakening something that was already there. The unenhanced animals moved with increasing coordination, their natural instincts heightened by some newly awakened awareness. Wolves that had never known technology now demonstrated complex tactical movements. Mountain lions showed strategic foresight that went beyond mere hunting instinct. Even the smallest creatures, ravens circling above, foxes darting through the underbrush, seemed to move with new purpose. "They're remembering," Dr. Chen whispered in awe. Not just Shadow's transferred memories, but something older, something buried in their own wild nature that we humans forgot how to see. The android soldiers opened fire, their energy weapons cutting through the storm. But the animals, enhanced and natural alike, moved as if they could anticipate every shot. The resistance fighters, following their lead, found themselves moving in perfect synchronization with their wild allies. It wasn't just cooperation. It was a kind of harmony that transcended species. Shadow's voice filled the radio one last time, but now it seemed to carry echoes of something ancient and powerful. The network gave us words, gave us ways to share our thoughts in human terms, but we've always had our own language, our own wisdom. What happens here tonight isn't an ending, it's a remembering, a return to what was always possible. The military helicopters descended, their weapons charged to maximum power. The android soldiers formed a final firing line. The neural network reached critical levels, the implants beginning to spark and smoke. "Now, Raven," Dr. Chen called out. "The network can't handle anymore, it has to be now." But Shadow had one final gift to share. As Raven's finger touched the radio's transmit button, she reared up and roared. Not the digitally enhanced roar of her implant, but something deeper, more primal. Every animal in the clearing, enhanced and natural, added their voices to hers. The sound seemed to shake the very air, creating harmonics that made the android soldiers' systems crash and the helicopter's targeting computers malfunction. In that moment of chaos, Raven pressed the button. The radio signal, amplified through Shadow's implant, cascaded through the neural network. Energy crackled between the enhanced animals as their implants overloaded. The android soldiers collapsed, their advanced AI systems fried by the feedback loop. The military helicopters spun out of control, their weapons powering down. But something else was happening too. As the technology failed, as the implants went dark one by one, the connection didn't break. The unenhanced animals continued moving in concert with their enhanced companions. The wolves, bears, and mountain lions maintained their strategic positions. Even as Shadow's implant sparked and died, her consciousness remained, not as digital data, but as something more fundamental. The network didn't create their connection, Dr. Chen realized, watching in amazement. It just helped us see what was already there. They don't need technology to be extraordinary. They always were. The storm began to clear, revealing the aftermath of the battle. The android soldiers lay deactivated, their advanced weapons reduced to scrap. The military helicopters had crashed in the surrounding forest, their crews, all automated, destroyed. The enhanced animals stood proud despite their smoking implants, their eyes clear and wild and fully their own again. Shadow turned to Raven one final time. Without the neural network, without the translation of technology, he couldn't hear her thoughts anymore. But he didn't need to. In her eyes he saw the same intelligence, the same consciousness that had always been there, not given by human technology, but finally recognized by human understanding. The other animals began to slip away into the forest, enhanced and unenhanced moving together as if they'd never been separate. The wolves formed new packs that ignored the old boundaries between natural and modified. The mountain lions paired off, their hunting patterns forever changed by their shared experiences. Even the elk moved with a new awareness, their natural herd behavior enriched by their time of enhanced consciousness. "Your father would be proud," Dr. Chen said softly, watching Shadow prepare to return to the wild. He saw this possibility all those years ago. Not that we could make animals more than they are, but that we could finally learn to see them for what they've always been. Shadow paused at the edge of the clearing. The rising sun caught her fur, highlighting the scars where the implant had been, but her eyes were clear, her movements once again fully her own. In them, Raven saw neither the mechanically enhanced intelligence that Neurobiome had tried to create, nor the simple animal instinct that humans had always assumed was the limit of wild consciousness. Instead, he saw something that had always been there, waiting to be recognized. A wisdom as old as the forests. A consciousness as deep as nature itself. As Shadow disappeared into the trees, followed by her new family of enhanced and natural animals alike, Raven understood that tonight hadn't just been about destroying a weapons program or shutting down a neural network. It had been about remembering something humans had forgotten, that the wild had never needed our technology to be intelligent, our networks to be connected, or our understanding to be conscious. The true miracle wasn't what the implants had created, but what they had helped us finally see, that the bridge between humans and animals had always existed. We had just forgotten how to cross it. Years later, visitors to Glacier National Park would sometimes report strange sightings, wolves that moved with impossible coordination, bears that showed extraordinary problem-solving abilities, entire ecosystems that seemed to operate with a kind of collective intelligence. And if they were lucky, they might catch a glimpse of a massive grizzly bear with unusual scars, leading a mixed family of enhanced and natural animals through the wilderness. Her implant was long gone, its technology destroyed that snowy night. But Shadow's legacy lived on in the wild wisdom she had awakened, not just in the animals who had shared her neural network, but in all those who had remembered what it meant to be truly wild, truly conscious, truly connected. 5 years after that fateful night, Raven Blackwood sat in his small cabin office, reviewing the latest wildlife footage from his research cameras. The changes in animal behavior had become impossible to ignore. Wolf packs now coordinated their movements across vast territories, sharing hunting grounds in ways that defied previous understanding of their territorial nature. Bears demonstrated tool use that went beyond anything previously documented, teaching these skills to their cubs who then shared them with others. Dr. Chen's research team, now operating openly with full government funding, had established a new scientific discipline: collective wildlife intelligence studies. Their papers on the post-enhancement behavioral changes in Glacier National Park's ecosystem had revolutionized how humans understood animal consciousness. "Dad, come look at this," Maya's voice called from the monitoring station she'd set up in their living room. Now 19 and studying wildlife biology, she'd become an essential part of their ongoing research. On her screens, a remarkable scene unfolded. A group of wolves and bears working together to rescue a young elk that had fallen into a ravine. The coordination between species, the problem-solving approach, the evident concern for an animal that should have been prey, it all spoke of something profound that had carried forward from that night. The USB drive from Raven's father had proved invaluable, exposing not just Neurobiome's illegal experiments, but a wider network of military-industrial exploitation of wildlife. The subsequent investigations had led to the dismantling of similar programs worldwide. More importantly, the evidence had forced humanity to confront a deeper truth about animal consciousness that could no longer be denied. Picking up his old radio, now a memorial paperweight on his desk, Raven remembered Shadow's final message about bridges between species. That bridge had only grown stronger in the years since. The animals of Glacier National Park had developed what researchers called cross-species cultural transmission, the ability to share learned behaviors not just within species but between them. Cubs born to formerly enhanced bears would somehow learn the same advanced behaviors. Wolf pups from regular packs would develop the same strategic awareness. It was as if Shadow's consciousness had become part of the very fabric of the ecosystem. Monthly meetings were now held at the ranger station, where researchers, trackers, and local tribe members shared observations and insights. The tribal elders had been the least surprised by the changes, speaking of ancient traditions that had always recognized animals as conscious beings, capable of sophisticated cooperation and intelligence. "We're picking up unusual activity in Sector 7, Maya called out again. Raven smiled at the familiar designation. They still used his old camera station numbers. Moving to join his daughter, he watched the feeds. Shadow's distinctive form appeared on the screen, leading a mixed group of animals through the spring snow. Though older now, she moved with the same purpose, the same awareness that had changed everything that night. But what caught Raven's attention was the young bear following close behind her. Born to a natural mother but clearly learning from Shadow, the cub demonstrated the same gentle intelligence, the same capacity for cross-species communication that had once required technological enhancement. Nature, it seemed, had found a way to preserve and pass on what technology had awakened. Dr. Chen's latest research suggested that the enhanced animals hadn't just passed on memories through the neural network that night. They had somehow activated dormant capabilities in their unenhanced companions, awakening a potential that had always existed in their wild DNA. Each generation since had demonstrated increasing signs of these capabilities, leading to what she called evolutionary acceleration through conscious adaptation. The military hardware from that night had been collected and stored in secure facilities, its advanced technology now being studied for peaceful applications. The android soldiers, when examined, had revealed surprising links to ancient research on animal consciousness, as if their creators had been trying to replicate in machines what they had discovered in enhanced animals. A knock at the cabin door interrupted Raven's thoughts. It was one of the new junior rangers, looking somewhat awestruck. "Sir, we've got visitors from the International Wildlife Intelligence Committee. They're here about the cross-species education program." The program had been Maya's idea, using the extraordinary developments in Glacier National Park to change how rangers and wildlife managers were trained worldwide. Instead of learning to manage animals as resources, they would learn to collaborate with them as conscious partners in ecosystem preservation. As Raven prepared to meet the committee members, he paused by his office window. In the distance, he could see Shadow's group moving along their usual patrol route. Other animals in their path would stop, observe, learn, not through any technological interface, but through a form of communication that humans were only beginning to understand. The old radio on his desk caught the morning light, its scarred surface a reminder of that crucial moment when technology had been sacrificed to preserve something far more valuable. Humanity had tried to force evolution through neural implants and control systems, only to discover that nature had its own path to consciousness and connection. Shadow's final gift hadn't been the destruction of Neurobiome's weapons program or the exposure of their illegal experiments. It had been showing humans that the wild had never needed our technology to be extraordinary. The animals had always possessed these capabilities: the awareness, the intelligence, the capacity for cooperation across species. They had simply been waiting for humans to evolve enough to recognize it. As Maya excitedly shared her latest research findings with the visiting committee, Raven watched Shadow's group disappear into the tree line. The morning sun caught the silver in her fur, highlighting the scars where the implant had been. But it was her eyes that still commanded attention, wild and free, yet carrying an ancient wisdom that technology had helped unveil but had never created. The true revolution hadn't been in the neural network or the enhanced consciousness it had temporarily created. It had been in the moment humans finally learned to see what had always been there, hidden in plain sight in the wild hearts and minds of the creatures who shared our world. Shadow's legacy lived on not in any technological advancement, but in the renewed connection between species, a bridge rebuilt between the human and animal worlds that never should have been broken in the first place. 10 years after that night, the changes had spread far beyond Glacier National Park. Similar phenomena began appearing in wildlife populations across the continent, then the world. From the wolf packs of Yellowstone to the elephant herds of Africa, animals were demonstrating levels of intelligence and cooperation that forced humanity to completely rethink its relationship with the natural world. Maya Blackwood, now doctor. Blackwood had established the International Center for Interspecies Communication. The center's headquarters, built on the edge of Glacier National Park, had been designed with input from studying how the enhanced and natural animals had modified their own environments. The building itself was a testament to the new partnership between humans and wildlife. Open corridors allowing animals to move freely through parts of the facility, observation areas designed to be non-intrusive, and research spaces that doubled as wildlife rehabilitation centers. The most remarkable thing, Maya explained to a group of visiting scientists, isn't just the intelligence they're showing, it's how they're choosing to interact with us. She gestured to the live feeds showing various sites around the world. In India, tigers were actively helping forest rangers patrol against poachers. In the Pacific, pods of whales were guiding ships away from dangerous storms. In the Amazon, entire ecosystems were reorganizing themselves to be more resilient against climate change. Raven, now the senior wildlife advisor for a coalition of national parks, spent most of his time traveling between these sites, documenting the changes and helping implement new conservation approaches. But he always returned to Glacier, to the place where it had all started, where Shadow still roamed with her ever-growing family of enhanced and natural animals. The old USB drive from his father had yielded more than just evidence against neurobiome. Hidden in encrypted files were decades of research into animal consciousness, including studies that had been suppressed because they challenged fundamental assumptions about human uniqueness. This data, combined with the ongoing observations of post-enhancement animal behavior, had led to the creation of the Wildlife Intelligence Rights Accord, the first international treaty to recognize animals as conscious, intelligent beings, deserving of legal protection. Dr. Chen, though retired from active research, still consulted on special cases. Her groundbreaking paper, The Shadow Effect, Technological Enhancement as a Catalyst for Natural Evolution, had become the foundation for a new understanding of consciousness itself. She had proven that the neural network, while destroyed, had somehow activated latent capabilities in the animal's natural neural structures, capabilities that were now being passed down genetically. "Watch this," Maya said, drawing attention to a particular monitor. The feed showed a young grizzly bear, one of Shadow's great-grandchildren, using a complex series of gestures to communicate with a wolf pack. The wolves, none of them descended from enhanced animals, responded with perfect understanding. More remarkably, a group of nearby ravens seemed to be observing and learning from the interaction. "They're teaching each other," a visiting researcher observed in awe. "Not just within species, but across them. It's like they've developed their own universal language. The implications went far beyond wildlife conservation. The ability of formerly enhanced animals to pass on their increased intelligence to unenhanced offspring had revolutionary implications for understanding consciousness, learning, and evolution itself. Some scientists theorized that the neural network hadn't just enhanced the animals. It had awakened something that had been dormant in all living things, a potential for connection and consciousness that humans had forgotten how to access. Shadow's impact on human society had been equally profound. The exposure of Neurobiome's experiments had led to a complete overhaul of how technology was developed and tested. The Android Soldier program, once examined, had revealed that its creators had been trying to replicate the natural intelligence they'd observed in enhanced animals, but their attempt to control and weaponize it had been their fundamental mistake. Instead, a new field of biomimetic technology had emerged, learning from rather than trying to control natural intelligence. The results were transformative. Communication systems based on wolf pack dynamics, environmental restoration projects guided by bear behavior patterns, even new approaches to artificial intelligence that drew inspiration from the collective wisdom of animal communities. But perhaps the most profound change was in how humans had begun to see themselves in relation to the natural world. The old paradigm of dominion and control had given way to one of partnership and mutual understanding. Children grew up learning not just about animals, but from them, understanding that consciousness and intelligence weren't uniquely human traits, but part of the vast tapestry of life on Earth. As the sun set over Glacier National Park, Raven stood with his daughter at their old observation point. Shadow appeared at the tree line, her fur now more silver than brown, but her movements still purposeful, her eyes still bright with that same extraordinary awareness. Behind her came members of her extended family, bears, wolves, mountain lions, all moving together with a coordination that spoke of something deeper than mere coexistence. "You know what amazes me most?" Maya said softly, watching the group move through the gathering dusk. "Not that they learned to be more like us, but that they helped us remember how to be more like them. Connected, aware, part of something bigger than ourselves." Shadow paused at the edge of the clearing, looking directly at them. In her eyes, Raven saw the same intelligence, the same consciousness he'd recognized that snowy night so many years ago. But now, he understood that the technology hadn't given her these qualities. It had simply helped humans learn to see what had always been there. As Shadow disappeared into the growing darkness with her family, Raven thought about the night he'd found her chained to that tree. Neurobiome had tried to create weapons, to force evolution through technology and control. Instead, they had inadvertently opened a door that could never be closed, not to artificial enhancement, but to the recognition of a natural intelligence that had existed all along. The true miracle wasn't that animals could be made more intelligent through technology. It was that humans had finally learned to be intelligent enough to recognize the consciousness that had always existed in the wild hearts around them. Shadow's legacy wasn't just in the changed behavior of the animals or the advanced understanding of scientists. It was in the restored connection between species, in the rebuilt bridge between worlds that had never truly been separate. As father and daughter walked back to the research center, a wolf's howl echoed through the valley. Not the simple call of a predator, but something richer, more complex, carrying echoes of the consciousness that Shadow had helped awaken. Other voices joined in: bears, mountain lions, birds, each adding their own note to a symphony of wild intelligence that humans were finally learning to hear and understand. The story that had begun with a bear chained to a tree had become something far greater, a reminder that consciousness, intelligence, and connection were not human inventions to be imposed on nature, but natural gifts to be recognized, respected, and preserved. In the end, Shadow's greatest contribution hadn't been in showing how animals could be more like humans, but in helping humans remember how to be more like animals, wild and free, yet deeply connected to the web of consciousness that bound all living things together. 20 years after that transformative night, Maya's daughter, Luna, stood in the observation dome of the newly completed Global Wildlife Intelligence Center. At 15, she represented the first generation to grow up in a world where animal consciousness was not just recognized, but celebrated. The dome's transparent walls offered a 360-degree view of Glacier National Park, now the epicenter of what scientists called the consciousness revolution. "Grandpa," Luna called out, her eyes fixed on one of the holographic displays floating in the air around her. The African sanctuaries are reporting another breakthrough. Raven, now in his 70s but still sharp as ever, moved to join his granddaughter. The display showed elephants in Kenya's protected zones demonstrating unprecedented levels of environmental engineering, actively reshaping their habitats to create sustainable water systems that benefited entire ecosystems. The center itself was a testament to how far things had come. Its design had been influenced by 2 decades of studying how enhanced and natural animals structured their communities. The building seemed to grow from the landscape itself, its living walls incorporating natural habitats that allowed wildlife to move freely through designated areas. Solar collectors shaped like leaves captured energy while providing shelter for birds and insects. Underground corridors, designed based on wolf den architectures, connected various research facilities. Dr. Maya Blackwood's latest project occupied the center's main research hub. The Interspecies Communication Network, or ICN, was mapping the complex ways animals shared information across species and continents. The project had revealed that Shadow's influence had catalyzed something far more profound than anyone had initially realized, a kind of global awakening in animal consciousness that continued to evolve. "Look at this," Luna said, bringing up another holographic display. This one showed real-time neural activity maps from various species across the park. The patterns were extraordinary: bears, wolves, birds, and even insects displaying synchronized brainwave patterns that suggested a level of collective consciousness humans were only beginning to understand. The old radio that had changed everything sat in a place of honor in the center's historical exhibit, along with other artifacts from that night. Next to it was Dr. Chen's original tablet, its screen still displaying the last readings from Shadow's neural network. But perhaps the most powerful artifact was the chain that had once bound Shadow to that tree, now transformed into a sculpture that symbolized the breaking of barriers between species. A commotion at one of the observation stations drew their attention. Shadow's latest descendant, a massive grizzly known as Echo, was demonstrating something remarkable. Using a combination of gestures, vocalizations, and body language, she was teaching a group of young wolves and bears what researchers called cross-species medicine, the use of specific plants and minerals for healing. "The most amazing thing," Luna explained to a group of visiting students, showing a natural talent for teaching that mirrored her mother's, "isn't just that they know which plants can heal. It's that they're actively cultivating these plants, creating natural pharmacies throughout their territories, and sharing this knowledge across species." The USB drive that had started it all had yielded one final secret just a few years ago: hidden files that suggested Raven's father and his colleagues had discovered similar instances of advanced animal consciousness decades earlier. But fear of disrupting the established order had led to these discoveries being suppressed. Shadow's story had finally brought that truth into the light. The implications extended far beyond wildlife conservation. The recognition of animal consciousness had revolutionized fields from medicine to technology, from urban planning to space exploration. Cities were being redesigned to incorporate wildlife corridors based on animal navigation patterns. Medical researchers were studying the collective healing behaviors of enhanced animal communities. Even AI development had been transformed, with new algorithms based on the natural intelligence displayed by multi-species animal groups. "They're here," Luna announced suddenly, her eyes bright with excitement. Through the dome's western window, they could see Shadow's extended family approaching. A procession of bears, wolves, mountain lions, and other species moving together with deliberate purpose. Though Shadow herself had passed on years ago, her legacy lived on in this extraordinary community. The group was led by Echo, her silver-tinged fur marking her as Shadow's direct descendant. Like her famous ancestor, she moved with a grace that spoke of both wild power and conscious intelligence. But unlike Shadow, Echo had never needed technological enhancement to access these capabilities. She represented what Dr. Chen had termed post-enhancement evolution, the natural emergence of heightened consciousness in subsequent generations. As Luna operated the holographic controls with practiced ease, bringing up multiple data streams to record the group's behavior, Raven reflected on how far they'd come. The world his granddaughter was growing up in was radically different from the one where he'd first found Shadow chained to that tree. The old paradigms of human supremacy and animal subjugation had given way to something far more profound. A recognition that consciousness itself was a spectrum, and humans were just one part of a vast tapestry of aware beings. The center's archives contained thousands of documented cases of animal intelligence that would have seemed impossible 2 decades ago. Wolves teaching bear cubs how to fish, ravens coordinating with deer to alert them to danger, entire ecosystems reorganizing themselves to become more resilient. But perhaps most remarkable was how ordinary such observations had become to Luna's generation. "You know what I love most about this place," Luna said, turning to her grandfather. "It's not just about studying animals anymore. It's about learning with them. Every day they teach us something new about consciousness, about connection, about being alive on this planet." Echo's group had reached the center's main observation area. As they settled into their usual patterns, some animals standing guard while others engaged in what could only be called teaching sessions with younger members, Luna activated the center's most advanced monitoring systems. The holographic displays filled with data, neural activity patterns, behavioral analyses, environmental impact assessments. But beyond the scientific measurements, beyond the data and research, there was something more fundamental happening. The barrier between human and animal consciousness that Shadow had first helped break down was continuing to dissolve. Each new generation, both human and animal, seemed to be born with a greater capacity for cross-species understanding. As the sun set over Glacier National Park, casting long shadows across the landscape that had witnessed this extraordinary transformation, Raven thought about the chain of events that had brought them here. What had started as one man's choice to help one bear had triggered a cascade of changes that continued to reshape the world. The night sky above the dome filled with stars, and somewhere in the distance, a wolf's howl echoed through the valleys. Other voices joined in: bears, mountain lions, coyotes, creating a symphony of wild consciousness that humans were finally learning to hear, not as noise, but as conversation. Luna stood at her controls, recording and analyzing, but also simply listening, understanding in a way that her grandfather's generation had only begun to grasp. This was Shadow's true legacy, not just the awakening of animal consciousness, but the awakening of human awareness to the vast web of intelligence that had always existed in the natural world. The technology that had once been meant to control and enhance had instead revealed something far more powerful: the inherent capacity for consciousness, connection, and understanding that had always been part of nature's design. As Echo led her group back into the gathering dusk, Luna made one final note in the center's database. Under the heading Observed Behaviors, she wrote simply, "They're not becoming more like us. We're remembering how to be more like them, connected, aware, and part of something greater than ourselves." 30 years after Shadow's story began, the scientific world gathered in Glacier National Park for the first global conference on enhanced natural intelligence. The massive biodome constructed for the event stretched across the same clearing where Shadow had once been chained, its transparent walls allowing participants to observe the wild community while discussing the extraordinary developments of the past decades. Dr. Maya Blackwood, now Director of the United Nations Wildlife Intelligence Commission, stood at the podium addressing scientists, researchers, and wildlife experts from every corner of the globe. Behind her, holographic displays showed live feeds from research sites worldwide. Dolphins in the Pacific teaching their unenhanced cousins complex problem-solving techniques, elephants in Africa developing sophisticated environmental restoration strategies, and even previously solitary species forming unprecedented cooperative communities. The neural inheritance theory, Maya explained, gesturing to complex data streams floating in the air around her, suggests that Shadow's enhanced consciousness didn't just transfer to her immediate companions that night. It triggered what we now call the cascading awareness effect, a fundamental shift in how animal consciousness expresses itself across generations and species. Luna, now heading the center's Youth Research Division, brought up a new set of holographic displays. These showed the latest breakthrough: real-time neural mapping of cross-species communication networks. The patterns were astounding. Intricate webs of consciousness linking not just individual animals but entire ecosystems. "What we're seeing," Luna continued, taking over from her mother, "isn't just learned behavior being passed down. It's an entirely new form of consciousness emergence. The enhanced intelligence that Shadow received through technology has somehow become encoded into the natural development of multiple species. But more than that, it's evolving, growing more sophisticated with each generation." The evidence was undeniable. Around the world, animals were displaying levels of intelligence and cooperation that went far beyond their enhanced ancestors. Species that had never been part of the original neural network were spontaneously developing similar capabilities. It was as if Shadow's awakened consciousness had become a catalyst for unlocking potential that had always existed in nature. In the medical wing of the center, Dr. Chen's protégé, Dr. Sarah Runningwolf, was making equally groundbreaking discoveries. Her team had identified what they called consciousness proteins, molecular structures that seem to facilitate the transmission of enhanced cognitive abilities from one generation to the next. The most remarkable aspect, Dr. Runningwolf explained to a group of visiting neuroscientists, is that these proteins aren't new mutations. They've always been present in animal neural structures. Something about Shadow's enhanced consciousness activated them, and now they're self-propagating across species barriers in ways we never thought possible. The implications extended far beyond animal behavior. The discovery of these consciousness proteins had revolutionized human medicine, leading to breakthrough treatments for neurological conditions. Studying how enhanced animals transmitted complex information across species had transformed our understanding of human learning and memory. Raven, now in his 80s but still sharp as ever, watched from his favorite observation post as Echo's latest cubs played with wolf pups in the valley below. Their interactions showed a sophistication that even Shadow hadn't displayed. Not just cooperation, but what appeared to be active teaching and cultural transmission between species. Remember when we thought we were the only ones capable of abstract thought? He mused to his great-granddaughter, Aurora, who at 7 years old represented the newest generation of wildlife researchers. She sat perched on his knee, carefully documenting the animal's behavior on her junior researcher's tablet. The old USB drive that had started it all had been officially declared a World Heritage Artifact, its contents now freely available in the center's public archives. But the most valuable data hadn't been in the files. It had been in what Shadow and her descendants had taught humanity about the true nature of consciousness itself. The Global Wildlife Intelligence Network, spanning every continent and major ecosystem, had revealed patterns that challenged the very foundations of evolutionary theory. Animals weren't just adapting to their environments. They were actively shaping them with a level of foresight and planning that suggested a form of collective intelligence humans were only beginning to understand. In the rainforests of South America, formerly endangered species were making unprecedented recoveries, guided by the enhanced awareness that had spread through their populations. In the oceans, whale pods were coordinating global migrations in ways that optimized marine ecosystem health. Even in urban areas, wildlife was displaying remarkable adaptation and problem-solving abilities, finding new ways to coexist with human civilization. The center's newest initiative, championed by Luna and supported by a worldwide coalition of research institutions, was perhaps the most ambitious yet: the Interspecies Cultural Heritage Project. Its goal was to document and preserve the unique traditions, behaviors, and knowledge systems that were emerging in animal communities around the world. "We're not just observing them anymore," Luna explained during an evening symposium. "We're learning to be students of their wisdom." The enhanced consciousness that Shadow helped unlock isn't just about intelligence. It's about a different way of being in the world, a different way of understanding our place in the web of life. As if to emphasize her point, Echo appeared at the edge of the biodome, accompanied by an extraordinary gathering of animals. Bears, wolves, mountain lions, and dozens of other species moved together in what researchers now recognized as a complex social ritual. Their movements, their vocalizations, their very presence spoke of a consciousness that defied traditional scientific categories. The latest neural scans, displayed in real time on the biodome's walls, showed something remarkable. When these different species came together, their brainwave patterns synchronized in ways that suggested a level of shared consciousness humans had once thought impossible. But more than that, the scans showed these patterns extending into the surrounding ecosystem. Plants, insects, even the soil itself seemed to pulse with a subtle resonance. Shadow didn't just show us that animals could be more intelligent, Maya reflected, watching the displays with her daughter and granddaughter. She showed us that consciousness itself is more vast, more connected, more extraordinary than we ever imagined. We thought we were giving them something with our technology, but really, we were just finally learning to see what had been there all along. Aurora, recording everything with the passionate attention only a 7-year-old could muster, looked up from her tablet. "But Grandma," she asked, "if the animals were always this smart, why didn't we see it before?" The question hung in the air as Echo's group began what researchers now called a wisdom-sharing session. Different species taking turns demonstrating skills and behaviors to the younger members of their extended family. The sight of bears teaching wolves, wolves teaching mountain lions, and all of them learning from each other had become normal to Aurora's generation, but it still filled the older researchers with awe. "Sometimes," Maya answered, watching a young bear cub carefully mimicking the gentle gestures of a wolf elder. "We can only see what we're ready to understand." Shadow didn't just break free from those chains that night. She helped break the chains in our own minds, the ones that kept us from seeing the true nature of consciousness in the world around us. As the sun set over Glacier National Park, casting long shadows across the landscape that had witnessed this extraordinary transformation, the assembled scientists and researchers fell silent. In the gathering dusk, Echo led her mixed family of species in what appeared to be a new behavior, one not yet documented in the center's extensive databases. The animals arranged themselves in a complex geometric pattern, their movements synchronized with a precision that spoke of deep understanding. As they settled, their combined breath seemed to create a harmony that resonated through the biodome. The neural scanning equipment recorded unprecedented levels of synchronized brain activity, not just between the animals but extending out into the surrounding environment. "They're not just communicating," Luna whispered, studying the readings. "They're creating something together, a kind of shared consciousness that includes all of us, the whole ecosystem." In that moment, as human technology recorded this extraordinary demonstration of natural intelligence, the true magnitude of Shadow's legacy became clear. She hadn't just been a bear who gained enhanced consciousness through technology. She had been a pioneer who helped humanity recognize the vast web of consciousness that had always existed in nature, a web that humans were finally learning to see, to study, and to join. The chains that had once bound Shadow to a tree had long since been transformed into a symbol of liberation.